Good afternoon, everyone. Today is June 17th, 2013. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'd like to welcome you to our regular Monday afternoon convention of the LaRouchesupport Policy Committee. We have 5 members of the committee joining us over Skype video, and I'm joined in the studio by Diane Sayer and Mr. LaRouche. I'll give it to you.
Well, there are some things that I'm about to do, and they probably will trickle into the proceedings today, because I'm really concerned about something very important. But it will trickle in. It is not necessary to bust in from the beginning right now. So we are all assembled, the usual crew, shall we say, and let's go ahead. What do you have to say about what you think we ought to do? Since you are coming in from the cold, so to speak.
Well, I thought the discussion yesterday was very useful. One, the discussion over the preceding days on your paper, which is really a challenge for us to have a different approach to the fight, both for Glass-Steagall and Obama's removal. And this question, which you have brought up time and time again, I suspect because we have not all mastered the ability to escape from sense perception. So that's a challenge. And then I thought particularly what was raised at the end on this, it is like a musical composition, the dynamic of events unfolding, the blowout of the system, what's happening in Europe with the euro, this drive toward war, which is terrifying. I mean, Obama's handlers are pushing us. It's now official that we're arming the Syrian rebels. And then this coordinated assault on the Obama presidency, which could bring him down. That's our intent, to remove him as the only way of our having a prayer of getting through this next period. So it's certainly a rich situation, and I think unpredictable. There are all kinds of things that could possibly break in the next days, which would be a good reason for us to be thinking on a higher level.
Yes, there could be a dumping of Obama, but not for what most people would think was the reason. Mm-hmm. And they dump him because he's now becoming a liability for the British Empire, that he cannot handle anything. He's just a nuisance. And we're seeing signs in that direction. And it shows in the question of Britain. There are divisions among the British ruling bodies right now. Mm-hmm. And this is quite lawful. But it doesn't mean we're secure. It means that the system is wobbly now. Because what they're threatening to do is to simply go directly to thermonuclear war. That's what they're threatening. And this new opening, in terms of what Obama got into, tends to commit the whole system to going to war quickly. And Obama's policy, or the policy associated with him or assigned to him, creates that problem, that they themselves are not in control of their own operation. Then you have the royal family is sort of disintegrating before our eyes, especially the distaff part. Mm-hmm. The whole thing is collapsing. And people do realize that this means probably the extinction of the human species. They were looking for a reduction of the population from 7 billion people to 1. And they're now deciding that they probably might be doing something which may go all the way. So there are hesitations and there are hysterias and all of these kinds of things. So we do have to actually change our perspective, that is an organization, which has too much things about discussing options. And I don't think options are the thing you want to discuss. You want to discuss what you're not going to do, not what the options are. And that's the way it has to be. We do have to get rid of this president. But we, in the United States, hopefully, institutions of government in the United States will take the action to dump this president, not have it happen as an accident. What we need is, that means we need positive thinking. You have to have some positive agreement, not all negative agreements. Negative agreements won't work. You have to have a positive agreement which is actually going to say we're going to do things. And the only thing that really will work is Glass-Steagall. Nothing will get the world out of this mess unless the U.S. initiates Glass-Steagall, because no one in Europe is really capable of Glass-Steagall. Not now. They may have wishes in that direction, regrets that they don't have that direction, but it'll have to come from the United States. And therefore our concern is we have to be the real leaders of this process. What we're doing in California on now schedule gives us an option, because by simply taking California, which was being cast aside into the rubble bin, if you bring California back into play as a factor in the United States and bring it back as a factor of play in the United States as a whole, that, I think, is the best option we have at this immediate week and the coming week. And I think that's where we should be concentrating a great deal of our effort.
Well, as people do know, while we wait for Michael to fix his technical problems, there is an important conference which the Schiller Institute is sponsoring, which is coming up in California in a matter of weeks. This is the next in the series of international conferences that has been occurring on the theme of a new paradigm. So maybe we can touch in with Michael a little bit later once his technical problems get fixed and hear a little bit about the progress towards that conference. But while we wait, maybe others have something to say.
I think we have a nearby, Dave may be a nearby voice.
Right.
I'll just add, I know in just discussions in coordinating along the West Coast, which of course, as people know, is a big geographic area, but really it is stunning that we have contacts from throughout the whole western states who are contemplating making the long drive or the long plane trip, or because they do see this as a profound moment. And I know that in some of the outreach to some of the old Nawapa circles, obviously this is Nawapa territory. And in terms of the farming, you look at the destruction of farming in California, the entire cattle dairy herds being slaughtered because of the grain prices going through the roof because of Obama's demand, or I should say the British imperial demand of 40% of our corn going into the gas tanks and being burned up. And so there is a quite lively response from organized labor, from farm networks, from people who recognize Nawapa as the keystone. And I think what was just recently put into the new pamphlet that we're getting out on the 3-step program to get out of this hell, with the Oregon extension and the California extension to the Nawapa program, it has definitely enlivened the dialogue around Nawapa in terms of some of the institutional layers and just the general population as well. So I think the emphasis, I know, was that the speakers that will be speaking at this conference, give about 25% of the time to lay out the problem, but really 75% of the time to lay out what this new paradigm has to be. And in addition to Nawapa and the expansion of the U.S. Productive capabilities, really with California and the West Coast, we are looking at a future for the United States and really the world to be oriented towards the Pacific, towards what should be our logical neighbors in Russia, China, India. And just as a contrast, something we haven't really addressed all that often, but I know does come up within layers, and especially on the West Coast in terms of unions, but this whole fraud of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The idea that you're going to have a Trans-Pacific Partnership, but you're going to somehow call it a partnership with Vietnam and Peru, and while that's fine to have relations with these nations, but the idea that you're going to leave out Russia, China, and India, it's an obvious attack. Really, it's an obvious to me, clear that this is vectored towards an overall drive to reduce the world population, starting in Russia or starting in China and India in particular, and this is what this is about. But I think this conference puts the fraud of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and really this true Pacific alliance that Lynn has outlined over the years, that we could connect through the Bering Straits, we could develop the Arctic, we could have that be the window into space, and that this is what the future of mankind is going to look like. So I think this conference is then really a nodal point in elaborating what the new paradigm looks like.
I put something in this right at this point. The key point to look about the whole thing we're doing on the U.S.-wide operation as a unit operation. As you have all experienced recently, the actual quantity of numbers of supporters is not the crucial issue. See, what if you operate on the basis of thinking of the mind, and you think the interaction of minds, where some people are taking the leadership among the minds, where people are reacting to each other, but some people are leading the reaction. And therefore, what we want to achieve and what the California effort will do, forget quantity. Don't start thinking in terms of quantity. You have a certain minimal quantity, which is a voice. If you have enough voices to make a voice, an effective voice, and if you can make it international and fully national and also international, you have enough people to do the job for leading the nation. The reason you have that power is because the nation otherwise doesn't have any competent leadership. We have to be, in our response, we are the best and the only real leadership in the United States now that's worth anything. Mm-hmm. Without us, the United States won't make it. And therefore, the quantity we have and the quality of the way we do it is what's crucial. I mean, look, take a general like MacArthur. How many people was he? And what does that typify? It means that the quality of leadership, which is not just who's got the credit and so forth, but who's got the mind in focus. How many people have a mind in focus which they share? Mm-hmm. That's what's important, because without us, the United States hasn't got a prayer of coming out of this. What we're doing is the only thing that can save the United States. Why? Because the United States needs a voice of leadership. And the other voices of leadership, aggregated, don't amount to anything. We have a concept and an admission. Glass-Steagall. Not just Glass-Steagall, but what it implies. Mm-hmm. We have a policy for the United States and for the world. Europe has no solutions as such. Other parts of the world are confused on the question of a global solution. We have a national solution concept, which is real, and we have a national concept which can lead the world from the United States. Mm-hmm. Nobody else, no other part of the world has a clear conception. You know what we have in Europe, but it's not enough. The overall situation, we don't have enough hegemony. We don't have enough active leadership. But with the United States exerting leadership, yes, we have enough in Europe. If we are able to call the shot on what Europe must do, the European nations must do, we can win. But without us, this planet is doomed. Without the forces we represent and what they represent in fact, in practice, mm-hmm. Because the issue of mankind is leadership. Not leadership in some arbitrary, calculated way, but the leadership of a mind, an intention which has a purpose which can solve the problem. whoever has the intention that could solve the problem is the leader. And if you have enough quantity and enough voice out there radiating, you're it. And that's the way we have to approach this thing. And so when they're playing up, just going into San Francisco, as we are doing, changes the entirety of the prospect of the United States. Whatever the quantity is that we're bringing to bear under these conditions determines the prospective fate of the United States. And what determines the fate of the United States determines the fate of the planet. And that's the way you have to think. Now, this is not an arbitrary way of forcing a thinking in a certain direction. This is a cold fact or a hot fact way of looking at reality. So the very fact that we went ahead and said we could not proceed without a California intervention. And San Francisco is enough of a base to have that impact when you add it and put it together effectively with all the elements that are needed. And that's what we have to get across to many of our own members. They are doing it. Our members who are out there operating every day, every week now, they're doing that. But they have to be conscious of the fact efficiently that they're doing that. And the problem in California, of course, is in San Francisco and especially Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is a disaster area. Politically, that was the gift of a racist from Europe, a pig from Europe, from Austria. And the Austrian pig just finished off pretty much California. So therefore you have only...
Schwarzenegger.
Yes. That's right. You only have San Francisco as a base of operations to trigger the West Coast. That's all you have. But that's the difference. So what we're going to be doing in San Francisco is what's all important. It's the one piece in the puzzle which has to be put in.
Well, I can speak to that now that I've returned here. One of the aspects that's come up that's begun to reinvigorate a number of the people here, and not fully, they're not fully back alive yet, but they're coming out of the doldrums of their cynicism, is really two major facets. Well, it is the recovery platform in total, because people are responding, one, to the immediate necessity of Glass-Steagall. We've gotten that response from a leading layer of the farm communities, which is getting devastated here. I mean, people have to have a sense, if you're not watching what's been happening to California, I mean, they are choking the land. They're shutting the water down to one of the most rich agricultural areas in the country. They're just shutting the water down. They're eliminating it. They're taxing the farmers to death. They're not able to survive. Dairy farmers are committing suicide in California, second and third generation dairy farmers. They just shut down one of the largest nuclear power plants in the state as we reach into what's likely to be a very hot summer with likely forest fires. So the state's getting devastated quickly. So the people are just pessimistic, they're cynical, they're trying to adapt, and this adaptation is absolutely insane. But the immediate recognition of Glass-Steagall is there. They respond quickly. Then the question comes up, well, Glass-Steagall, but, it's never going to get through, or it's so difficult, or there's so much opposition. But then you start talking about a Hamilton banking system, about the idea that you don't need a Federal Reserve System bailing out Wall Street. You need a system of a national commercial bank lending to the development of the country as an integrated project for the nation, where people can actually invest into that with their savings. And that can be then lend to the nation's development long term, and they get excited. You put NWAPA on the table, and you begin to resurrect a John Kennedy era political commitment that many of these people have had, whether they come from the Irish community in San Francisco or the farm communities, and they recognize there's a potential to do something, but they have to think big. They've got to think beyond the scope of their little resource managements, or how much they can maximize soil potential, or getting a few jobs for their labor unions, whatever it might be. They've got to think about the actual development of the human species. And I think that's really where these conferences that we've had, and this will be the fifth one, really begin to try to resurrect a sense of what mankind is from the standpoint of these policies. That a policy commitment is a reflection of how we think of the human species in a scientific and artistic way. And that's what we've got to bring these people into that fold, because the real challenge then becomes that cultural cynicism. And I think we're reaching some of these layers. We've got a lot of work to do to recruit them. But I think the conference can bring together a quality of discussion of people. One indication, we had a person who ran for U.S. Senate in California. He thinks of the Nawapa project as the project of the millennium. There is still a certain sense of that idea of thinking big, of broad development, kind of the Western state perspective. You think big because everything out here is huge, huge distances, huge land areas, huge deserts. So we've got to bring that kind of thing of subduing the desert, this huge Western desert, into the power of man. And I think this is a good place to start with this conference. So I'll leave it there and see what else.
I think you ought to make that address to everybody in California and so forth as well. Because what you just said encompasses almost everything. Almost everything. And therefore, we have to do some more work in that direction. That's exactly what we have to say to them, which you, as a representative of this operation, have to say to California and other locations. We have to generate from California this kind of constructive optimism as leadership, and to denounce anyone who's thinking in a different direction. Because the potentialities, the elements of potentiality of winning this fight exist. We must not lose it. And you just laid out the statement, which has to go out in California in particular. We have to get every kind of media we can get to in California in particular, just radiating it from San Francisco. And get that out. And if you get a sense of pride of the San Francisco community, that they can win if the other guys get on it, you have the formula to tickle the result which is needed. Do it.
Do it. We'll tickle away.
I think that.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that's really important, because I think you really set into pace the cross development of a continent-wide national international project. And California, it's interesting because people wouldn't see that as a leading force in initiating something like this, and we're starting to see even here in Texas, in discussing what's going on with this conference, people saying that having an idea that this can be a real and has to be a real breakthrough and shift in terms of how we move forward with this Nawapa project and with our international policy, our national policy for a three-point policy solution. But I also think what I wanted to just bring up is the question of, what we were discussing before. What does it take? How are we going to move and transform? You were just talking about this question of leadership, the minds of the population, to think about and to actually reject the insanity of the way that they've been thinking and how they're thinking from the standpoint of, you look at the fact that right now we're at a point of a total breakdown crisis. We're at the point of a threat of thermonuclear war. And some people can say, well, is it really that bad? It hasn't happened yet. You guys have been talking about thermonuclear war for a while. Can't we just, play it out again? And it's the whole question that comes up again of people's sense perception, of people wanting to believe in, is it really going to happen? I haven't seen it yet, so if I haven't seen it yet or I haven't experienced it yet, is it any likelihood that it's going to happen? And it was interesting because I went to an event, and this is just a very indicative example of the insanity in thinking. This was an event at a astronomical society where they were discussing the activity of the sun. and they were discussing what is happening right now with the increased activity of the sun. This was a NASA-related event, and the speaker was a professor from Rice University. And he basically tried to downplay this as, yeah, you have some active activity going on with the sun. You have all different types of phenomena that are happening. You have all different types of, coronal mass ejections and these various things happening with the sun. But I don't think it's anything for you to be concerned about. And when he was asked, what is the time frame that we have in terms of warning signals for this, if in terms of activity coming from the sun? And he said maybe about 24 hours if at best, if you're lucky. And then when it came up, well, what does it actually really represent? What is the harm factor? And he says, well, you have various things that have happened in the past, the Carrington event, the 1989 Canadian event with the wiping out of the power grids. But, it's very unlikely that anything will happen like that again. And a lot of that is just Hollywood scare factor. And so I don't think we need to be concerned about that. Why don't we think about nice, pretty things like what the sun does to create an aurora borealis? So I'm saying these things because people really don't, they don't get the danger that we're in right now when we're not taking up these very fundamental questions of, one, why we haven't built Nawapa yet. Two, why we don't have a space program that is going to take up the question of how we actually save mankind from mass extinctions, whether it be through the threat of asteroids coming to the planet, or whether it be through the activities of the sun and how we're going to deal with the effects on the sun, on weather, on our environment, and things like this. And so what we're talking about with the initiation of this, and the continuation of these conferences is really setting into pace what is going to have to be the policy initiative for saving mankind from this threat of mass extinction. And we're getting to the point after now, with this being the 5th conference, that people are going to have to immediately change the way that they've been thinking about this process unfolding so far, and has to take this up as a real challenge to, are you going to continue to go along with the stupidity in thinking, or are you going to actually start to fight for a real future?
But look at your own, what you just reported on this professor at this conference. Now, first of all, he indicated in the remarks you report, the body, that he's aware of the reality. But he's just saying, don't think about it. Now, what does that mean? That means that if he has the status that he claims to have in his community, scientific community, he was lying. Now, why would he lie about this? The way he put it in his conclusion, as you reported it, why would he lie like that? Because his concern is not humanity. His concern is being in with the dirty crowd that's trying to run the world. Because he knows it's the destruction, but he says, my loyalty is to my master. My master. Who's your master? Oh, the master is the man who's kissing the butt of the British monarchy and similar kinds of trash. So therefore, you just simply, the way you have to deal with this thing, you have to mobilize people and say, this guy is a crap artist. That's what he is. Anyone in those conditions that you laid, he's a crap artist. He's a liar. But he's the kind of professional whose profession is, guess what? It's a certain kind of prostitution. Political prostitution.
It's the oldest profession.
It's considered the oldest profession. we don't know. The other ones probably died out,
And you just don't want people to buy into these things, to accept it as being true, whether or not, he can be a peon professor or something. I don't know his qualifications, but one thing is that when people sit there and they actually believe these things and they know that it's not true, that's when it becomes the problem also.
Afraid of being unpopular.
Yes, I saw that exactly at this conference I just went to in New Jersey on infrastructure. So the first panel gets up and they go through, and it's horrifying. The pipes in New Jersey are losing 26% of the drinking water because the pipes are so old. So 25% of the treated water that's drinkable is just being lost into the soil. In Camden County, it's up to 50%. Then they get to the next panel on energy, and there's various discussion about what do we do and how do you convince people that we need this because they can't see it, it's all underground, so they're more moved by a bridge that's collapsing and not the fact that they're not going to have any drinking water. And then there was a whole other thing on the wastewater, which is another giant mess. Then they get to the panel on energy, and I really was horrified. Each panel had 5 people. And on this panel, at the end of the panel, is this guy who says that they are replacing nuclear power with solar energy. And this is a whole conference filled with people who know better, because I talked to them and I said, this is insane. And everyone agreed with me and said, you're right. Because he asserted that New Jersey now has, and I think, and Michael, I think we've surpassed California in the number of solar panels in the state of New Jersey. And we have 20,000 installations where they have big banks of solar panels. He said, at peak conditions, which means if it's perfect weather, perfectly sunny, not a cloud in the sky, and it's that way throughout the entire state, all of these solar panels combined, these 20,000 installations, can produce 1,100 megawatts of electricity, which is the same or more than the nuclear plant they're talking about shutting down. And therefore, we can replace this. It was a spectacularly, criminally insane argument. And everybody went along with this as if it were normal to be discussing doing this.
That's fear. That's the only answer from that, from a state, New Jersey, with the various age groups. At least the oldest age group would be freaked out. The next level would be disturbed. And the final, smallest and newest one would just simply say, oh, great. And that's what we're up against. So the important thing is not people, not the quantities. What's important is the leadership. And which generation is going to take leadership. And therefore, you're looking for the generation that will respond to the need to take leadership and not submit to the categories of young people and so forth and other people who will completely support Obama. Those people, you have to write them off as being stupid. And say so. Say we got a problem of people. It's not that real suffering in this nation is caused by the stupidity of many of them, who cause the suffering of them all. And that's the truth of the matter. So the point is, leadership is the issue, and that we cannot back off from leadership. You go out and say, "Look, do you know what happened the other day? This is all crap. Did you realize that? I'm sure you knew it was all crap. What do you think we ought to do about it?" And that's the answer. What are we going to do about this crap that these people are pushing on people? You know, here's a guy who's obviously either stupid or he's lying his head off. And you sat back there and let it happen? No. The point here is leadership. And leadership does not mean beating people up, but it certainly does beat up some of their opinions and get them straightened out and sane again.
Yeah, just an example of that. You said in your recent paper that the society right now can't conceive of the future, so they're basically slaves of their own mind. And Dave Christie was reporting on this earlier, another call we had, that most people right now are thinking about their own survival. They really don't have a concept of thinking about the future. Congress in particular, I mean, it's true, these guys don't know anything. They don't know what to do. They truly need us. But just one example on this idea of pushing a mind into the future, it's never going to come from a description, a literal description of the facts. And so you see this in Shakespeare. There's the discussion of the chorus that we've been having, which points to it very directly, saying, use the audience's imagination to create something which isn't literally here on stage. But then so that's one example. But another point that I'd like to make with it is the idea that when an audience leaves the play, they're in a sense, the play isn't finished. Particularly with a well composed tragedy or drama, there's not a simple solution. There's not a perfect hero. If there were, the action of the play would be complete within the play. But as there's not, and as the audience therefore is a direct participant, the play is completed by the actions of the audience as they leave. And in a sense, that's the only truthful form of art, is one which is still allowing for an improvement in action to be created in the universe as a result.
Yeah, it's precisely the case. It's precisely it. And you look at it, if you look at Shakespeare, and particularly the Henry V, which is a very explicit statement, that statement makes the whole argument obvious. It's one of the most important things in all history with that particular play, because it did that. And obviously he was headed toward that in that direction before, Shakespeare was. But then after that, he boosted that. But he went into different dimensions, more particularized dimension in his later dramas. This was something which is much more crucial from the top down. The others would go with reactions and top down at a later time. They were important, but they didn't have the same grasp, the same optimism that was had in that one case, in the Henry V. That was the most optimistic thing you can imagine. And nothing could match it. All he could do was repeat it or go to niches of the same thing and try to reinforce what he had already accomplished. And that's what we have to consider. We have to look at ourselves in this way. We have to look at ourselves as playing the role that he did in his Henry V. And by understanding the insight of what he did explicitly, which very few people seem to recognize anymore, they don't understand what the play is. They don't really get the significance. They just think it's an argument of some kind. They don't see that the one is the truth and the other is not. And that's the difference. And that's what we have to rely upon, is getting that point across. The other things that were somewhat different. They were very important dramas as dramas, but that had a earth-shaking quality, Henry V, as nothing else does when it was properly performed. And then that led into what other aspects of classical artistic composition, like the work of Bach and other things of that nature, the great dramas that otherwise came from other playwrights in the same framework. We have lost that. What we have lost is we've lost a militancy concerning maintaining that particular outlook. We need to have a militant commitment to that kind of outlook on mankind, on art, on everything. We have to have this completely positive conception of what mankind is, what we're going to do for mankind, not what we're going to observe as happening to mankind, but what we're going to do for mankind. And the drama should always be on what are we going to do for mankind, given the circumstances and the future that we foresee.
Well, I think that particular concept, I mean, given what Michael laid out in terms of what we're about to do in California, this idea that we are going to take responsibility for the whole nation, I think, is extremely important. Particularly in the population here in the Midwest, where you have a layer of industrialists, people who would like to be employed productively, oftentimes see themselves as victims. And they like to identify simply politically with how they see that they are being screwed by Obama, or what the EPA is doing to them, or what Obamacare is doing to them personally. And will be very eager to know, how do we plan to get Obama out? How do we plan to stop the bailouts? But in particular with this new pamphlet, and I think what we're about to do in California, when you take people into the future and you lay out, look, here is the fight over whether mankind is going to survive or not. We are going to have to do this. You are going to have to be involved in doing this. And in particular, with individuals who have oftentimes been in a certain business, a certain family industry for generations, as we sometimes run into here, or have taken responsibility and identify with a key aspect of the productive process, of a very advanced productive process, you can bring these people into a sense of the Hamiltonian tradition and start from the future and work backwards to have a sense of how there's got to be a complete transformation. And the response on that is qualitatively different, and it puts a concept to the name of Glass-Steagall credit system and NWAPA. And so I think what we are going to do in California will have a dramatic resonance for that sense of the participation in the future, and we're going to take responsibility for the entire country. So
you've got to add one thing to that: the crime of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, he was under extreme difficulty at that point, but he canceled Glass-Steagall.
Yeah.
He signed it. That's his, and he never admitted that that was a crime. I had a sort of indirect debate with him, but nose to nose in terms of debate on the same question, which came into the question of what had happened to the auto industry. He had no response on that. He totally collapsed on that. And do we realize that what the Bush administration had done in various ways, but it was Clinton himself who capitulated on Glass-Steagall. And that capitulation set into motion everything for the Bush operation. And they were doing everything possible to crush Clinton. So he has some amelioration factors in this thing, what was done to him, and how it was done to him, and how he's a little bit stupid on top of other things in some matters. Right? But the point was he did not have the courage to defend the nation against the biggest sellout that the United States has suffered. And that was the cancellation of Glass-Steagall. And anyone who was really patriotic would fight like hell to defend Glass-Steagall. That's the one thing they would not give up. And anyone who would give up on that stuff was really an unforgivable coward in the highest position, when he had the ability to just jam the works on this thing. Of course, he wanted coming out of the presidency. He wanted this good thing and that good thing and this good thing, and buy his way back in. But what he did, he sold the nation out. That makes no difference what pressure he was under. If you commit treason, you commit treason. Whatever your excuse is, you committed treason. Mm-hmm. And he didn't explicitly commit treason, but he did implicitly. And his failure to react to that at later times, he wanted a secure life as the next president. That's what he's always played. He just played it again, the same damn thing. He played the same thing all over again and again and again. This guy can never get himself straight on these issues. He may have some good feelings at times and good things about good things, but when the whole question is considered, he's a damn failure. He had every chance of being not a failure, even despite the prosecution he came under. He didn't have to give in. He had to have guts, but he wouldn't have been rich as an ex-president. That's the difference. He wanted a poor boy coming up from Arkansas always wants to be rich.
This was the same time that Tony Blair came and announced the end of the Westphalian system, and using the precedent of the actions in Kosovo, declared that the age of national sovereignty is over, and we will go and commit military action anywhere we choose, despite international law, national sovereignty, or the Treaty of Westphalia, which is what is now the basis of first Libya and now the actions that Obama's taking in Syria.
That's exactly the case, precisely the case. So therefore, since we have run out of qualified presidents, we're going to have to do a little bit presidenting ourselves in our own way. We're going to have to give leadership to this nation because it doesn't exist except as we can produce it. And that's a fact. And the California, San Francisco, that convention is going to be the test of doing that. To pull the whole nation together, the sense of a whole nation, and pull it together by taking a part that's being the now being the destroyed part. Defend it quickly. Reply, retort, crush.
The one manifestation of this chorus principle that's been we've encountered, we set up these book tables out on the streets of the population in various places, and people walk up to the table, and they kind of come over to you and in different ways, and more or less always kind of ask one question. So, we're all condemned, don't you? This whole thing is screwed. We're not going to make it. I know you can tell too. You've got a Hitler mustache on Obama. We're all dead. Get your guns, get your ammo. And you go, no. We're going to destroy those bastards. We're going to win. That's what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And all of a sudden, they realize you're not in the play. You're outside. And when we're effective, we do that, and it works, and people realize they don't have to be stuck in the play. They can actually become part of reality, outside what they perceive with their senses. And just an interesting intersection of the process. We had a discussion here Sunday after the call yesterday. We have to destroy these bastards, but not as if a slave who wants to kill their master. We have to bring up the population to the point of a Promethean identity, where you're going to destroy them, not for the sake of their destruction, but for the sake of the future of mankind, a sense of an elite of mankind, not of just some slave who wants to take revenge. We've got to get people to that level of a poetic identity. That's where victory lies. That's got to be the essence of our organizing.
The intellectual, moral elite. That's the only place to be these days. Nothing else works. So you've got quite a job on your hands.
You could say that again.
Well, we'll all be working for you.
It's a chorus.
Yeah. Yes. And Helga will have something to say about this.
Good. Okay, very good. Thanks for joining us today. That's the conclusion to our program. Stay tuned.